Greetings, dear viewers. This is George from Ireland, and I'm continuing my series on the Northern Irish Troubles. So I left off in late 1972. The negotiations have broken down between the IRA and the British government. The British public weren't told that these talks had been going on, and the Prime Minister at the time, Edward Heath, didn't meet the IRA. But anyway, there was a terrible recrudescence of violence that summer. There was a huge number of sectarian slayings, so killing was almost a daily occurrence in Northern Ireland at the time. Internment was a bit more targeted in late 1972. The Crown forces knew who they were looking for. They weren't throwing people in willy-nilly as they had in 1971. Likewise with the Loyalist terrorists too. The Crown seldom bothered to prosecute people. If they had a fairly good idea someone was a Loyalist or indeed a Republican terrorist, they would just lock them up because they suspended habeas corpus. They said it was an emergency, they needed to do this. The Republic of Ireland IRA membership was a crime, and the Irish authorities occasionally prosecuted people for IRA membership, most notably Martin McGuinness. He was given 6 months for it, and at his trial he said he was an officer of the IRA. He fought to prevent the killing of his people, and he was very proud of it. So violent crime was on the up and up in the Irish Republic at the time, and people just became desensitized to violence. There had been hardly any armed robberies in the 60s. By the early 70s there were many. John Simpson, British journalist who was at the time, said it seemed as though the Republic of Ireland was in a pre-revolutionary situation. Prison population in Southern Ireland in the 60s had been 300. By the end of the 70s it was almost 3,000. So it had just shot up, and there were a lot of bank robberies, payroll robberies, not all of whom were carried out by the official IRA or the provisional IRA, people sometimes claiming they were doing it to raise funds for the cause, even though they weren't. So opinion was divided in the Republic of Ireland about the IRA. A few were vociferously in favour, many were ambivalent, some were against. De Valera, the Taoiseach in the 50s, had said, our sympathy with their motives mustn't blind us to their actions. So most people agreed with the long-term objective of the 32-county republic. It was a question of how to bring it about. So the UK government was constantly pressurising Dublin to do more about it. Notably, on the 1st of January 1973, the Republic of Ireland and the UK both became members of the European Economic Community. So that was something where they could cooperate. Sir Edward Heath, British Prime Minister, was a very keen Europhile. Jack Lynch was his opposite number. The UK government was often disappointed that the Irish government didn't take firm action against the IRA, but it was difficult for the Irish government because there was considerable sympathy for the IRA south of the border. Depends what they were doing. If they were killing a Loyalist terrorist, most people would be jubilant about that. Killing security forces, not so much. Killing Protestant civilians, not many people would support that. Some would say, well, the Loyalist terrorists do it to our people, so we simply have to hit back for various reasons, because the Loyalists are not going to stop. Unless we cause them a great deal of pain and make them see that them killing Catholics is not going to help them, that they're going to be hit back twice as hard. The IRA claimed to be not sectarian, but it certainly indulged in many sectarian slayings. The Loyalist terrorists were at least honest enough to say that they were sectarian. So what is it motivated the Loyalist terrorists? Well, many reasons. Now, visceral anti-Catholicism was one of them. There was a desire to remain united with Great Britain because that was their national identity, ensure they had a better economy, better public services and so forth. They felt greater civil liberty in terms of freedom of expression, the right to divorce and so on. So for many of these reasons. Loyalists were often saying, oh, the Irish government is backing up the IRA, which is not true, but the Irish government is not as active as it could have been. But again, it would be stretching the loyalty of the Guards to ask them to be particularly active against the IRA, because with Loyalist terrorists killing Catholic civilians every week, it was difficult for the Guards to bring themselves to be particularly enthusiastic about arresting the IRA, because the IRA was the only ones who were counter-striking against the UVF and indeed the UDA. And the security forces were not entirely blameless. Father Dennis Fall, a Catholic priest in the north, he documented many cases of the RUC or the army beating up Republican suspects in custody, which very seldom happened to Loyalist suspects. Anyway, there were attempts at rapprochement between the two governments, but the IRA had felt they were on the up and up in 1972. So talk about Victory 72. When they were invited for those secret talks in Cheyne Walk, they thought this was really going to happen, that the British Army would be scrambling for their ships. Remember, it was the end of an era of decolonisation since 1947, and the IRA claimed it was a colonial situation, wouldn't accept that Northern Ireland was part of the domestic British state. Well, Victory 72 turned into Victory 73, Victory 74, Victory 75. After that, they stopped claiming the next year was going to end in triumph for them. So the UDA and the UVF, they killed Catholic civilians, partly because they just were anti-Catholic, partly because they thought they would put unbearable pressure on the IRA from the Catholic community. Please desist from your campaign because we're going to get it in the neck from the loyalist paramilitaries. The UVF and UDA said that the IRA draw succor from the Catholic community, and there is some truth in that. The IRA would find that people were informing on them because other Catholics wanted to scupper the IRA's attacks, because they knew if an IRA attack went ahead, there was going to be payback, as in loyalist terrorists were going to kill Catholics who were completely uninvolved with the IRA. But the tit-for-tat sectarian killings were going on. Gustav Spence was the man who'd founded the UVF in 1966, which has got nothing to do with the original UVF or the 1913 foundation. Gustav Spence had killed an unarmed Catholic who was not a member of the IRA at all, way back in 1966. Augustus Spence was let out for his daughter's wedding in 1972. Then he was taken by some UVF men, almost kidnapped, not returned from prison. He'd been let out for a few hours parole. So there had been some prison officers escorting him, but they'd been held at gunpoint. So Gustav Spence was in hiding, was moved around from one safe house to another for another few months. Eventually he was recaptured by the RUC and returned to the clink. The UVF stopped talking about the big push using First World War terminology, as in if they killed enough civilians, this would somehow result in success for them. Well, some Catholics were so terrified because of this vicious UVF campaign, some of them left the country, going to the Republic of Ireland, going to the United States, even Great Britain. So in that sense, it was a success for the Loyalists, a limited success, because a Catholic person is very likely a nationalist voter, and the more Catholics there are, the more likely Northern Ireland will be voted into joining the Republic of Ireland. So there was a certain logic to the UVF's crimes. Not saying it was remotely moral, it was disgustingly immoral, but there was some reason behind the crimes they were committing. So the IRA continued its efforts to wreck the economy, which again is richly ironic, as they'd often complained about high unemployment, especially amongst the Catholic community. So sectarianism had been fairly bad in the 60s, but by the 70s it was sky high. There was a lot of rancour, and most businesses were Protestant owned. They were even less keen to employ a Catholic person in the 70s, saying, how do we know that so-and-so is not setting us up for the IRA to plant a bomb here or to come and carry out a sectarian killing and so on? McGuinness was bombing the heart out of his own city, Derry, and creating more unemployment. Now, of course, most of the businesses were Protestant owned, so perhaps he thought that was acceptable, as they were likely to be unionists. But it was also the Trotskyite slogan of the worse the better. If people are content, have jobs, and things are functioning quite well, they're less likely to try and support a revolutionary movement. But if they're suffering severely, they might well throw in their lot with a revolutionary organisation saying, well, we need total change, we seek a drastic solution to our problems. Anyway, there was mass unemployment in the Republic of Ireland. Almost half the young people left the country. So leaving the UK, joining the Irish Republic, was not going to be a solution to high unemployment and economic woes. February 1973, the Loyalist Association of Workers called a strike, demanding more stringent security measures and the immediate release of loyalist terrorist suspects who'd been interned. Glenn Barr was one of the doyens of the Loyalist Association of Workers, LAW. Another was Andy Tyree. Glenn Barr has gone to his reward just a few months ago. Now, not surprisingly, the LAW had no objection to Republican suspects being locked up without charge. The strike failed, but they got the hang of the tactic. They were going to come back to that one a bit later. There were roadblocks all over Northern Ireland. The army set them up to try and disrupt terrorist activity? Is this a UVF or an IRA person on the run? Are they transporting weapons and so on? They'd be set up in the small hours of the morning and go for several hours and then suddenly move, just in case the IRA was moving in to snipe at them. And they'd be on a hairpin bend, so by the time you came to the roadblock, it was too late to turn around. You couldn't see them. So there'd be about 4 soldiers at the roadblock and a couple either side further out to see that the IRA weren't coming in at them. Loyalists were not going to attack a roadblock, although admittedly the Loyalist terrorists did sometimes murder RUC officers. The very first RUC man killed in the conflict, Victor Arbuckle, was killed by a Loyalist. Anyway, that's enough for a moment.